Hello ladies and gents, today I will be telling you about the Kangaroo Court that was DR Court in a Florida State prison. I will describe my crime and my dormitory in detail, along with the whole process and how it overall affected my stay. First, the dorm, without a brief description of which this all becomes a little difficult to picture. So, I was housed in open dormitories. They were large rectangular rooms with showers and toilet stalls located around a 90-degree corner. These were both fairly visible from inside of a large plasticine glass box with a large steel door for the guards to sit in all day and watch TV or YouTube, often Joe Rogan, and theoretically watch us. Mostly, they were there to report on fights or gross safety violations, like when you try and climb up and manually dislodge a jammed ceiling fan because no one from maintenance would come fix it. I didn't do that, sadly. That would have been a useful thing to get in trouble for. This big door on the glass box faced a small hallway that led to the door out of the dorm itself. This layout was replicated again on the other side, forming what was so cleverly referred to as a T-dorm. This was my dorm. This was my actual prison. These little buildings were canteens and barber shops, as well as one medical building, which was used almost exclusively for urine tests. No shit, they piss test you all the time. These are the dorms with cells, and one was used for DR housing. Okay, enough of that shit. That out of the way, and with this layout in mind, this was my high crime. I smoked a cigarette. I know, don't worry. My punishment came swiftly and in just the manner to reinforce my father's long time and long ignored to my detriment advice. He said to me, "Son, there's something about our family's luck, there's something about the name that makes it so you will not be able to get away with the things that other people get away with. When we joke about you jumping off a bridge because your friends do, we mean that even when they're all fine, you're gonna break your ankle." And, as with most advice that your parents give you and then you mostly ignore, he was right. This is one of those instances of many in my life. So, to tell it in total, I got off work, well, colloquially, work as it is, and it was a particularly annoying day. It was a test day, I think. There were a lot of these test periods wherein several herds of migrant test takers would flood through the sally port and into our testing area to test for GEDs and standard cognitive testing. It was during one of these, remember, that I was passed a note which I promptly destroyed. Anyhow, I come back into the dorm and I grab my usual things to roll a cigarette, as you do when you can't afford to buy the pre-rolled too often, and I trotted off to the last stall of the restroom area around the corner. Now mind you, this was common, and to clarify, cigarettes were allowed, but theoretically were not meant to be smoked in the dorms. A lot of things theoretically weren't supposed to happen, but did. Smoking in the dorm was only one of them. Most of the guards, as with most of these things, ignored it in favor of, in this instance, having the smokers be mostly calm instead of wound up about tobacco. Some even jokingly announced during the nighttime lockdown, "Time to smoke your last cigarettes." However, as with most jobs, one performs it slightly differently when you're witnessed by one's overseer than when one is not. So, my luck should have it that no sooner do I light my cigarette that the captain were to burst into the dorm to talk to the guard in his booth. He has to cover about 3 feet of open space to get to the door. However, like a bird dog, he locks up halfway between the exit and the door to the booth, and snaps his head my way. By now, I obviously dropped the cigarette into the toilet and was elbowing the flush button. Too late. The guard in the booth had actually done his job, and with the press of a button, had made it so that none of the toilets would flush. This is a fairly common thing for them to have built into prisons and even into normal jails and other correctional facilities. I was busted. They handcuffed me, dragged me out, and wrote me up with a DR, which is short for a disciplinary report or referral, depending on your facility. And this is the funny part, I was given a court date. When I came back to the dorms after this brief excursion, of course, I was razzed by all the usual suspects, but simultaneously consoled at the same time by these folks, and they constantly told me that they weren't going to put me in the box, or the jail inside the prison, as they laughingly called it. Just take my privileges and gain time, more than likely. To define it, gain time in Florida is the 15% of your overall time you can earn back on good behavior. Nothing like California with its, 50%, but it's something. And it's something I really wanted, if I'm being honest. So, almost 1 month later, and with my gain time gain being frozen, I waited for my day in Kangaroo Court. When the date came, a whole big to-do was made of it. About 45 minutes beforehand, they came and they collected me. Usually, when you're moved about the facility by a guard, as a minimum security inmate, you're just followed around and told where to go. This time, they came with the full set of jewelry. Cuffs, ankle cuffs, and a waist chain and anklet chain to just tie it all together. Oh, good. So, locked up like that, I was walked from here all the way to here. And the whole time, of course, being hurried on and prodded into little hopping steps, where I was eventually deposited into a bare cell, and waited with no info for the rest of the time. This was fine, really. I didn't expect any info, and quiet time alone was heavily valued, so... When I was finally collected again, I was deposited, literally about 10 steps or so in total, across the small hallway and into a little room, with a clock, a US flag, a desk, and 2 very angry-looking men sitting there in uniforms. There was no chair provided for me. I was expected to just stand, of course. This is how I met the warden. They read out my crime, along with whatever numbers were associated with the violation, and they asked me for my plea. I pled not guilty, of course, because, well, often that's just what you do. For a moment, they both stared at me, looked at each other, and the warden said, "Son, entering a plea of not guilty would trigger another hearing in another month, during which time you will not be gaining any gain time, and you would inevitably be found guilty by the word of the captain here, as the witness who saw you, commit the crime. When that happens, you will be sentenced to the maximum punishment of 60 days in confinement with a loss of gain time. How long are you here for?" 1 year, sir. The JROTC came back fast in me. Well, you have some gain time now, and I would recommend you keep receiving gain time and release you back to population. I don't see any reason why you should spend almost the rest of your time here in confinement. He then entered a plea of guilty for me without me saying anything else, finalized the paperwork, shut my file, and pushed it aside. He then directed the bailiff/guard, I don't know what to call him at that point. He's kind of in a court, he's kind of as an acting bailiff, but all of this is also kinda just for show. He put me back in the waiting cell where he'd withdrawn me from, and very, very shortly thereafter came and uncuffed me, which I just found hilarious because you can tell the cuffs were just there for show and to make you submissive in front of the warden, and they returned me to my dorm. Upon this return, the exact same people that razzed me celebrated my release, and we all had cake. It's not a joke. One of my bunkies that I used to play cards with, he made me a cake while I was gone, in celebration. Or consolation if I didn't come back. I suppose they'd be able to eat the cake without me. Prison's weird. But that's it for me, ladies and gents, the requested story, and my eventual realization that, frankly, DR Court is about as real and functional as our normal courts are at this point. I hope you enjoyed as usual. Stay safe, good luck, and goodbye. We'll be forgoing the credits to say a little something.
Free Count Dankula! Free Mark Meechan!
Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil!
Gas the Jews?
Gas the Jews? Do I gas the Jews? Bitte. Do I gas the Jews? Come on, gas the Jews, mate! Come on, gas the Jews!
Gas the Jews?
Sieg Heil!
Sieg heil. Sieg heil. Sieg heil. Sieg heil. Who's a good wee Nazi?